Okay, it looks like we're live. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to having a chat again today. I'd like to welcome my co-host, Arthur Kalos. Arthur is a financial services entrepreneur, but also an amazing financial planner in his own right as well. My name is Kylie Denton. I specialise in working with senior leaders in financial services and their teams, helping them to develop a high-performing team. So today we're here to talk about how do we articulate our values and our fees. And we talked about this last week, didn't we, Arthur?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
We talked about it last week, and we got so many comments and so many, so much more input than we have for our last couple of other lives. So we thought we'd do a take two and talk about it in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. Unscripted and live.
Unscripted and live.
Unscripted and live. Yeah, it's awesome. So I think we should also mention that Bram's not with us today, so we look forward to having him next week, right? So the Three Musketeers are down to two at the moment. But yeah, look, it's such an interesting topic. And there'll be so many different opinions about, the how and the when. I think there's the emotional aspect in terms of understanding the client's emotion and the right time to ask. There's the psychological aspect, which we talked about last week, in terms of heightening our own belief in ourselves and believing in our product and our service to be able to ask for the price that's at the right point. I think for me, there's so many variables, isn't there? And there's so many different opinions about this topic. And I think they're all got merit. It's all about what works for you, right, at the end of the day. Yeah. And so I think anyone that's looking to review this, there's probably a couple of steps that you need to probably think through prior to commencing that review. And, first and foremost, it comes down to, if you've got an existing client base, it's, looking at that client base and understanding which part of that client base is at the moment unaffordable to serve. At the moment, in a midpoint where if things continued for a little bit longer, they could become unaffordable, or they don't have the capacity to increase. And there might be a second half of that segment where they may not be paying the right price point now, but they may have the capacity or growing capacity to increase. And then there's the advocates, in that segment. So I think anyone that's looking to review is about looking at who do you serve now, where do they sit in that affordability matrix, and what opportunities exist to now deleverage, the client base, or potentially find another advisor to sell the clients to realise some capital, but also give another advisor in the industry who may have the capacity or the desire to work with those types of clients to grow their business. So, there's strategies around that, segmentation approach.
Yep.
That's probably the first step. I'm happy to keep on going, but I don't want to.
Well, I love that you've got so much passion with this. And I think we've seen a lot of financial planners do more of that, haven't we? We've seen more of them, especially over the last 12 months, figure out what kind of clients they want to serve, okay, and either pass on the clients that aren't affordable onto other advisors, or, which is where I've worked with a group on, is how do we increase the price of it so that they can actually justify this new fee, because they don't want to lose the client.
That's right.
But they just need to increase it because they can't service them with an $800 or a $900 or a $1,000 advice fee, because
that's unserviceable. Yeah. Cost to serve, if you're not generating anywhere at least $2,200 to $3,300 minimum ongoing, from a cost to serve perspective, and reverse engineering it back to what you want to be paid per hour. Anything below that is in that unaffordable or at a price point that is not sustainable. So the whole cost to serve exercise has to be done. So that's kind of like the second step. Yes. So if you like to do a laundry list of, what do I need to do to review my pricing model, my value proposition? It's, looking at the segments of your client base, understanding where all the clients sit, understanding the capacity of all the clients, your appetite to serve which segment more or less, and then looking at your actual cost to serve and reviewing that. So there's all sorts of costs that have increased, and you've got to reverse engineer it back to a client level to therefore understand, well, what is the minimum I can exchange to generate the profit margin I need per client. And so that's a fairly simple exercise if you've got the right tools, or we have the tools in our dealer group offering, and we support our planners with that stuff. That's kind of like the second step, to actually understand, okay, segments, cost to serve. Okay, well, this is like the price point from a cost perspective, but that doesn't mean that you exchange at that price because you exchange at value. So it's about understanding your baseline first, right? So that's the cost approach.
Yeah. Before we move on to, I know you've got another point, but before we move on to that, I think, you know, as owners, we tend to do that. We tend to understand what the fees are and how we've actually come up with that amount. But I think it's really important for either the owner or the director to be able to trickle that information down to the other financial planners within the office so that they can really understand that this is why we're charging $3,500. It's not just because we want to make a huge amount of profit, but this is how we do it. And then it also helps the financial planner to be able to feel more confident when they're face to face with the client to be able to articulate that fee. And I want to get into the how a little bit later, but I'll get you to keep moving on to your next point.
Yeah, I think I've got a bit of a stepping stone kind of.
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah, so single planner practice definitely, you know, points are made are very relevant. But you're right, you know, at the end of the day, as the owner, you got to make sure that your people and your advisors are empowered, understand the why, and then, you know, get to the how. But you know, that would then mean that, you know, you have to, you know, as the owner, reassess, you know, your salary lines, your incentive lines, and make sure that that all rolls up correctly as well, right? So to ensure that the right price points are being adhered to, you know, the whole affordability to remunerate your advisors, to retain them, to reward them, to, to encourage them to do more, give them incentive to do more, and rolling back that through like a scorecard approach, and having that as a, you know, as an element or a KPI within that framework, you know, has to be on the agenda. You know, for the owners and employers of financial planners as well. I think, you know, once you've kind of worked out the economics and your baselines and your segments, you know, then it comes down to, you know, the actual exchange itself. And so from a review of your value proposition, it's all to do with trust. And we talked about the research that we did last week around, you know, the number one factor is trustworthiness. And, you know, there's this conversation of when do I introduce the fee and when do we do this? I mean, some advisors do it up front, some advisors do some now, some later, some advisors do it at all at the end. Each has its own place. But ideally, it's when the trust is achieved at the highest point. And so when the trust between the advisor and the client is at its highest point, that's when you can actually raise the price because they trust you, right? So, but there's got to be steps, and there's got to be a journey, and there's got to be a level of experience that takes that, you know, step change upwards. There's some study from Huthwaite's, you know, years and years ago that talked about, you know, pricing and the correlation between price and trust. And basically, there's a simple diagram where you have some bar graphs, bar lines. And so basically, as you know, as the bars increased in height, it's representing higher level of trust. And there's a science that actually proved that you could actually charge more at that point. And so sometimes it's not about how much trust you can generate in the first interview. It's the lead up too. So you might engage with a client or a prospect, and you might put them through some kind of experience prior, which could be soft touch marketing, education, value adds. So then before the meeting, the level of trust is not at zero; it's actually at, you know, level 2. And then you've got a short climb to get to level 4, whatever that might be, right? So, you know, I think there's a whole onboarding experience, and so that's what I'm talking about. The CVP is what is the customer journey for your organisation, and what are the opportunities that you've got prior to meeting the client for the first time to actually start that journey sooner, so that then you can actually, you know, ultimately reach that level of height to then demand and command a level of price that the client feels comfortable with and sees value in. So, so for the client, you know, they're looking for clarity of services, you know, up front, but they're looking for educational opportunities and to buy into your value proposition, your practice philosophy prior to meeting them. Yeah. So trust and peace of mind has to be at a level prior to the first meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that, because what you've talked about is how do we look at it with a business eye, from a profitability perspective, and the kind of clients that we want to service. But then you've touched on what do we want to consider prior to them even knowing anything about you as the financial planner or even as the business. I want to get into now we've actually know the client, we've got a bum on a seat and they're in the office with us. And I want to talk about, I want to share a framework that I always coach financial planners on around how do we have the conversation. And you touched on that journey, around taking them on that journey. So I'm going to see if this works. This is the first time I've put a banner up. So let's see what actually happens. Please, it did it. Yay. Happy days. So you're going to see at the bottom of the banner there, you're going to see the introduce, discovery, or discover, educate, benefit, and commit. So these are the 5 stages. This is a sales framework. This is a conversation framework. This is how to have a meaningful conversation with a client and taking them along the journey. Okay. And that introduce stage is all about that, that building rapport, creating an agenda, providing your CVP, so the client gets that, a little bit of a feel of you. We all know that clients buy from us if they like us, trust us, and have confidence in us. So that first stage is really important. And I often find this first stage is many financial planners are really good at sharing their value proposition about their company, but not so much about them. Okay, and we touched on that last week, that personal value proposition, how long you've been in the industry, your experience, your knowledge, all of that, okay, why you do it, what's your purpose, what's your why, and really getting in that. And this is at a time also when I find that some clients will actually be asking in this stage, so how much is it going to cost me? How much is it going to cost me? And the financial planner's going, I have no idea. I don't even know if I can help you. We haven't even got into that stage. So there's some clients, and even Brahm talked about this last week around, the DISC profiling. Some people need to know that up front. So often I'm talking about to financial planners and training financial planners around how do we park that until we get to know a little bit more. And sometimes I use what is called a banding effect. Okay, so if clients want to know how much the plan's going to cost, and we don't yet know because we don't even know how we can help them, it's good to be able to go, right, well, most of my clients normally are around 2,500, some are right up to 7,500. I'm not going to know exactly where you are until we get to the end of the appointment. Okay. But based on what you've told me or what I know about you, you might be sitting around the middle. Okay. So the client goes, oh, well, I'm not basic. Okay. But I'm not going to be the most expensive. He thinks that I might, or she thinks that I might be somewhere in the middle. So now I can just calm down and I can just listen to what's actually going to happen in the appointment. So that's a really good approach for financial planners, to be able to just park it, but then also say, look, let me first understand what it is that you need. Let me see whether or not I can help you. I'll be able to understand more about that at the end of the appointment. So that's a really good approach from that perspective. And then you've got the educate and the benefit. The discovery is all about obviously asking great questions, meaningful questions, emotional questions, questions that really get down to what's truly important. But that educate and benefit is where you're really educating them on the services or the solutions or the topics, strategies that you can help them with. But the benefit is, how does it link back to the client's needs? We often forget that. We just assume they should know that. Okay. Yep. But that benefit, linking it back to what they told you in that discovery and then linking it back to how you can help them, that's where you show your value. That's where you were able to really articulate the value. You told me what was really important to you was to make sure that you could retire at the age of 60. You wanted to be able to spend some time with your family. You wanted to be able to make sure that you had, $55,000 per annum as an income. You wanted to be able to travel. So that we can put the plan together, the value is you get that peace of mind. You get the retirement that you want, okay? And I think when we articulate the value more so than the cost, even though the cost is part of the value, the client actually says, I'll pay that, because actually they're going to give me what I need to do. So I'm willing to pay whatever it costs, because I just want to be able to have that retirement or have that peace of mind.
Yeah. It's a good framework, isn't it? And the item that you mentioned earlier around, correct questioning techniques, so often do we, because we're so, compelled to help people, they raise a problem and you want to, give them a solution, and you want to show them that, how dedicated you are to helping them. But I think you got to tease out the problems more with clients. And I think the step around, they identify a problem explicitly, but so you've got to draw out some of those implied or implicit needs. And the only way you get those implicit needs or implied needs is that it's not at the forefront of the client's mind, but it's in the back of their mind, and you've got to draw it out. And the more implicit needs you draw out through your question techniques, and they explicitly state that it is what their needs, you're heightening the need for advice. And therefore, through the heightening for the need of the advice, the scale that you mentioned, the range, starts to move up the scale, because they're committing, they're actually stating that this is what I need. So they're reaffirming, what they thought, deep down might be an issue. They're actually confirming it and committing to that particular outcome. And so it's drawing out those implied or explicit needs through the to the question techniques. And then, before you go to solution, the technique that, I was brought up through was the implication question. So you've stated this, but if you don't do it, what would be the implication? So what you're then doing is saying, well, they're seeing the upside. So everyone's like seeing the positive side, but then they've got to explicitly state, well, if I don't do this, the implications are this. But you've got to ask them. So this idea, Kylie, that we're speaking about will help you achieve your goal by this point, or whatever goal it might be. But if we don't do this today with you and work through the process and giving you the advice, what would be the situation if and then I'll go down to the downside. And we all know pain generates a different response to incentive, right? So incentive is a strong emotion, but avoiding pain is even stronger, right? So when they go through that in their mind and they explicitly state that, that's when you're building more trust. That's when they're heightening in their mind the need for advice, and that's where the advisor can then move up the scale that you mentioned.
Yeah, you're right. And I often find that discovery stage is financial planners, we want to move on to the educate stage really fast. We want to quickly get out of there. But if we move out of there too fast, we actually we ask a question, then we educate, and then we go back and ask another question, and then we educate, and then we go back, and it becomes this real ping pong effect, okay? Yeah. So it's about staying in that discovery space until there is absolutely nothing more that you can discover. And then once you know that, it's kind of like what I do in my head is like, okay, I know what I need to talk to them about around superannuation. Now I know what I need to talk to them about investments and insurances or taxation or Centrelink or whatever. I've kind of pillared it up in my head. But if I move out of that discovery space too fast, then it becomes just like a ping pong effect. Yeah. And I think that last stage around the commit is where we actually are getting them to commit to the price. Yeah. Okay, and this is where we're overcoming objections, and we're trying to help them. We're trying to overcome those objections, because there will be objections. We're in sales, aren't we? I mean, and that's the reality of it.
So they should be. I mean, at the end of the day, we should welcome that and be challenged. And really, they've probably already made up their minds in their head. They're just asking those questions just to see the response. And so understand and believe in your services and product, and welcome objections and answer them diligently and welcome them as a challenge to overcome. But look, I think it's a great framework. I think the other thing as well, as an advisor, it's what is your personal brand promise? You're talking about this before, Kylie, around we all know what our business value proposition is. We all know what our company stands for. But you as an advisor, and if you employ advisors, go through that exercise. There's some great tools on the internet or anything like that. Or Kylie, you might have some of this nature. There's your personal brand plan framework. Sorry. So your questions would be your competencies within yourself. So what are your skills? What can you advise in? Your competencies with other people. But what are you going to stand for? What type of advisor do you want to be? How do you want to be seen? And so when you start understanding who you want to be and what you stand for, that's a very important step to take, because when someone throws an objection at you, if you're not sure of yourself, it's not going to come out right. So I think that's another important step in a whole review.
Yeah. And look, I often get financial planners, if they are getting a lot of objections, then especially around pricing, because I often find if they follow a process or a structured and consistent way, then the objections we will generally only get will be around pricing, okay? But if we're getting an objection around pricing, then what I want the financial planner to do, and what I want all of the audience to be able to do, is just to be able to reflect, have I shown how I'm going to help them? Have I shown them the value in not only me as their advisor, okay, but also in me being able to develop the strategy in order for them to have that peace of mind, okay, or trust that I'm going to do the right thing, or trust that I'm going to get them to where they need to be. So if we're getting a lot of objections, then go back and check, have I added the benefit? Have I shown them the value? Okay. And the last thing I probably want to comment around here is make sure you're confident when you're doing that. Make sure you are really confident, your shoulders are back, you're looking at them directly in the face. Yes, you're looking at them directly in the face, and you're really being proud of what it is that you offer. Because I actually think that we were looking at some average fees not long ago, a couple of months back, and the average fee was around $3,300. Okay, I honestly think that for the amount of work that a financial planner has to do to get that plan ready, $3,300 isn't a lot.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Okay.
And with all the change in revenue lines, etc., cross-subsidisation, practices through grandfather comms now being removed, reducing margins on life insurance where you could have kind of, captured a fee through the com, but, that's now been reduced to 2/3 or 66%, then you've got to shift the mindset from, comms to fees. And so that's absolutely important. I think to close out the overcoming the objections part, Kylie, it's you've probably missed a step in that framework that I presented, which is around the building of trust through explicitly getting the client to state that that's the need that they want, but then taking them through the because if you haven't done that right, if you do that right, the objections will be less because you haven't admitted it. As soon as I start thinking, that's what I need, and I understand that if I don't do it, this is going to be the consequence, then you think the need. So I think objections would, be a lot less if you've gone through that model, that framework successfully, and that's by asking the right questions, the right problem questions, and then understanding the implications of not addressing the problem, getting the client to explicitly state that before you jump to solution mode.
Yeah. And I know that when I was advising, and I used to write a lot of life insurance, I used to do exactly the same. When a client would say, I can't afford that, and you'd go, okay, well, so what do we want to remove? Do we not want to pay off the mortgage? Do we not want to put the kids through, the private education? What is it that we need to remove in order to make sure? And then they go, oh, no. So I think when you get them to work with you around, is this really important? Is this what you want? Is this going to give you that peace of mind? Then that's when the client is on that journey with you.
Yep. Very good. How are we going for time? We've got.
Well, I was just about to say we're 23 minutes now. So we might stop there because it clearly goes to show that even with not having Brahm here, we can talk way too much. So look, what I want to do just prior to us going is, if anyone is struggling with objections, reach out to Arthur and I. We're always more than welcome to have a chat and help you overcome any of those objections. Just via a phone call or even a Zoom. So reach out if you need us, because we know that it can be tough, especially as an advisor out there trying to deal with all of this as well. So thank you so much for your time, Brahm. Arthur.
I'm sure he'll be watching the recording sometime later.
He will. He'll have a good laugh at that too. Have a great day and take care, and see you, everyone. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to seeing everyone again next week.
Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, everyone.